Well, Susan, this is delightful to see you today, and I get to do the introduction. I'm so tickled. Thank you for coming to talk to everyone about Big Trouble on Sullivan's Island. I loved the book. I just loved it. I know readers have questions. I have questions and comments, and I would love to hear how it was for you writing this book, what inspired it. Why did you go into this new series with a PI character a little bit different than your other series?
Okay, so that's a good question, and I've had that a lot. Why would I start this new series when I had a well-established series with a private investigator who operates in Charleston, South Carolina, to come back now with a new private investigator who operates in Charleston, South Carolina? And the answer to that is long and complicated and, quite frankly, boring. But the short answer is my agent told me to. So, this was part of her plan to move me to a bigger publisher and get a big advance. And because I had written mysteries in the past, she wanted me to write another mystery that was, in effect, exactly like what I had been doing, only completely different. So that's what I tried to do. Things didn't work out quite the way she planned with that, but I'm actually very happy with the way things have worked out so far, at least. But I wrote it because I was advised to. And actually, at first, I was a little bit resistant to it because I wanted to write women's fiction. Grace, because we've talked about it. I've wanted to write women's fiction for a while. And I had this story in my head that I wanted to write about these women of the Sullivan's Island Supper Club. And so what I did was a little bit rebellious in that I took those women and put them in this new mystery because I wanted to write about them. And I couldn't write about them just yet. And I thought, okay, we'll just fold this in here together. So that's what I did.
I was fascinated by the character of Hadley. I was totally in her skin, and I thought she was fabulous. I love how she would beat up the cars on her birthday. I did. I was really, the facets of her were very different and yet very cohesive. I could see her as a whole character, and I thought that was fabulous. Is she someone that was already existing in your head, or did she just kind of grow as you were writing the story?
So it's interesting. I think Hadley and Liz are both actually parts of me. They're just different parts of me. That they have different things. And I knew I had to make them different. I had to make Hadley a very different character from Liz. And so I just pulled those things that felt different. And like, here's one example. So the gun thing, Hadley does not like guns. And the genesis of that is, I felt like I needed to learn to shoot a 9mm because Liz Talbot carries one in her Kate Spade handbag. And I had written about this, and I really knew nothing about guns at all. And so I thought I needed to learn how to do it. So I went to the gun range with some friends who do that sort of thing. And they bought me this box of bullets, and they're like, here's your pink target. And I actually did really good, but I didn't enjoy it at all. In fact, I was so intimidated by that gun, I wanted nothing to do with it. I was supposed to use the whole box of bullets, and I was like, nope, that's enough for me. And those things went in a drawer until I gave them away to somebody. But I just was so intimidated. I did not like guns. I didn't want anything to do with them. And I thought, okay, this is a way I can make Liz and Hadley different. I'm going to give Hadley this, she doesn't like guns like me. And so I kind of divvied up attributes, and it's funny because I have been telling people Liz is a blonde like me, and Hadley is a brunette like me. And it kind of works like that. I give them both oceanfront houses to live in because that's my fantasy. Yes. But I just kind of divvied up some of the attributes. And the whole thing with, whole food, plant-based, Liz eats the way I've eaten most of my life. Her mother's, fried everything. And Hadley eats the way my husband and I eat now because we're scared out of our minds and want to protect our health.
That's good. That's really good. I have been on Sullivan's Island. I have not spent time on Sullivan's Island, but I have been ridden around it to get a look at it. And it is pretty amazing. And the way you describe it, I do feel like that's what I saw. I thought, oh, okay, yes, I recognize this place.
That makes me happy.
Yeah, it was really, really good. I'm sorry, however, that Hadley is so allergic to Faulkner's saliva. Where did that come from?
Okay, now Liz Talbot has the golden retriever, Rhett. And I try to work into every book, that, she's taking care of Rhett, she's walked him, she's fed him, she's done this, she's done that. If she's going to be away from home for a period of time, she gets Mary to watch him, or Blake, somebody checks on him. But I still get emails from people who think that Rhett has been left by himself too long. I'm clearly not a dog person. Because Rhett's been left by himself, and I shouldn't leave him by himself that long. And I wrote this many chapters and didn't check in with Rhett or whatever. And so they worry about this dog. And I don't want to.
Somebody needs to. Clearly, you are not.
I know. But here's the thing. I don't want to slow down the pacing of the story. And when you're pacing a story, you don't want to slow things down with a lot of details. And it's not just dog details; it's any kind of details. You won't
brushing your teeth. When do they go to the bathroom?
Right.
Yes, I know.
There's so many things that happen in a character's life every day that you don't put on the page because it's boring. And so I just figured after once or twice, it's boring for the readers to hear me say, and she fed the dog, or she put food in the bowl or whatever. So I didn't mention it every single time. And so I thought, okay, with Hadley, instead of giving her a dog, I'm going to make her allergic to dogs so that she can never, ever have one. And then I don't have to worry about getting the emails because I'm not doing right by the dog.
But you gave her a dog encounter.
But I did give her a dog encounter, yes. And she has an aquarium, a very nice aquarium full of fish. And it's not that I'm not a dog person. I am actually. As a matter of fact, Rhett in the Liz Talbot series is based on a golden retriever that we had when our kids were younger. His name was Buffett, and he was a great dog. We loved Buffett. But dogs, dogs don't live forever, and we've had multiple pets over the years, but we're at a point in our lives now where we both travel a lot. And so having a pet seems unfair to the pet because he would be like boarded or staying with someone else for a while. And I don't want to do that. So right now we don't have a dog. We are dog people, but just decided with Hadley that that would be the safest route to go to give her the allergies, but then allow her to enjoy other people's pets with the encounters, like the one with Eugenia and Faulkner and that kind of thing. So
I thought it was a brilliant way to bring her into contact with Eugenia and to establish that relationship, because Eugenia is such a people fixer. Once you get her attention, you really are not safe from her trying to fix you.
You're not.
And so having Faulkner be rescued even put upon Eugenia an even greater responsibility because her dog was saved by Hadley. So Eugenia was going to go all out and probably cross boundaries that should not have been crossed, but that's okay. And unfortunately, we lose Eugenia. To the pacing thing, I would like to say, this is my personal thing, and I think someone in one of the questions referenced this also. Mrs. Josephine UG, right?
Yes.
Which, of course, my brain wants to say Huger.
Exactly.
Right. And I really, really appreciated how you put that pronunciation phonetically in parentheses next to the name each time, because you knew my brain would default back to that pronunciation, right?
Mine still does too.
I love that you did that with some of the other names also that I can't begin to replicate in the way that apparently they are supposed to be said, except Legree. Now, all these years when I've read that word in various novels, I've always read Blaguer. but it's
As one
McCree,
would. Yeah.
as one would. So I really appreciated that. But beyond that, Miss Josephine and her Arthur, I loved how you used them to break the pacing. You had us moving headlong each time in the story. And the first time you did it, I thought you're just using it to show us some insight into something that Hadley could not have provided, right? Because she was not on scene or not seeing it from the perspective of an outsider, depending on which of the ones we're talking about. So that was when I thought you were doing it first. But then as you continued to represent Ms. Josephine and her Arthur in those short passages, what I really appreciated was the breathing moment. So you stopped me in the narrative where I'm rushing headlong, and a lot of readers will know what I'm saying. When you're rushing headlong like that, you get 2/3 through the book and you're not even quite sure what you read. It gets jumbled, right? You're not digesting it. So when I had to pause and read Ms. Josephine, it was like intermission. It was like a brief intermission during which something really entertaining was happening. And I didn't leave my seat. I didn't go get popcorn. I stayed right with the story, but I was digesting what I had already read at the same time so that I was prepared to move forward. I don't know if you intended that, but that was such a blessing. And when they were rerouting the body to the other funeral, I actually flat out just laughed and laughed and laughed at that. That just tickled my funny bone. So anyone who hasn't read the book, it will sound horrible that I'm saying that I thought that was funny, but it was hilarious. It was, but Miss Josephine didn't interrupt her intention to go to that funeral, even if the funeral was anyway. It was hilarious, and I hope other people appreciated it and enjoyed it as much as I do. I'm actually sure they did because it was pretty cool. So thank you for that. What made you think to do that?
Well, to the Josephine thing in the beginning, when I was just sort of figuring all this out, and I mean, I had an outline, but I didn't have Josephine in there at all. She sort of came to me as I was beginning the book, and I wanted to, I had the scene in my head, the scene from chapter 2 with Hadley and Dylan in Hanks. And I have actually sat in Hanks and had dinner at the bar so that I could like see all of the restaurant, and just have this view of everything going on. So I've sat there and had a leisurely dinner and plotted this out in my head. So I knew how I wanted it to go. But I didn't necessarily want the reader to be in Hadley's head during that scene. I wanted them to have the perspective of an outsider on that. So I initially had her really, I only was thinking about that one scene. And then a little bit later, I don't know if I actually was smart enough to consider the pacing thing, although in hindsight, I'm so glad, and it just makes me so happy to hear you say that. And I'm glad that it worked out that way, but I wish I could say that was intentional, but I think it was
I think it was instinctive, Susan.
It may have been an instinct.
Just like story is instinctive at some level, I think it was instinctive. Okay, proceed, please.
As I was going, I would get to a point to where I would think, now is a good time for her, some of her perspective. And it wasn't really a pacing thing, but it may have been instinctive. But I just wanted her viewpoint on things. And after I wrote like 2 of those scenes, I liked that character so much, I started looking for opportunities to put her in other places. And then I thought, this character's a keeper. She's going to be back. I'm going to have her back because I just enjoyed writing her so much. And the scene from the funeral, that I had so much fun with that. And I really entertained myself with that. And that's 89% of what I do is entertain myself, and hope other people are entertained by it as well. But I really just enjoyed that scene so much. And once it came to me, and it's one of those things that was just kind of a flash, and I was like, oh yes, this is what we're going to do, because I had this character, and I guess Fish really kind of drove that, even though, the ladies were there on scene and all that, but Fish kind of drove that, because I had this image of him and that VW microbus that he drove, and this down and out, used to be rich kid, had all the money in the world, blew it. Now he lives in the pool house, and he drives this old beat up Volkswagen van, but he's just a really cool guy, and so I thought, okay, I can use him. And then it just flashed in my brain to, the image of the casket sticking out of that VW bus, and I thought this will be fun. So I had a lot of fun with that.
I thought it was interesting, now that you mentioned Fish and his relationship with Eugenia, that they had been long-term friends.
Mm-hmm.
And she had taken him in when he had kind of really wrecked his life.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you've got Hadley and her friend North, with a very similar kind of relationship.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, it is, again, not really intentional. I'm getting all kinds of perspective on my book.
A parallel sort of thing. Yeah. Which was really sweet. And in fact, the house that Hadley lived in, I would like to move there. Is it available? I kind of felt like you were building it to specifications.
Sadly, I was.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a figment of my imagination. I did pick out a spot on the map, and I actually pulled up the Google map so that I could see like the addresses, like on either side of where I wanted to put this house, and I put it at an imaginary address between houses that are there. I just sort of slid them over and slid it in. And so I could make it exactly what I wanted it to be. And then I had Googled that, houses that were modern beach houses. And I had all these examples, and I picked the pictures of the exterior and the floor plan and the pictures of the interior, how it was decorated. I have a folder on my computer with all this stuff. And then I just described it the way I thought, okay, I want it to look like this and this and this. And now in my head, I know exactly what it looks like, but it's a figment of my imagination. And yes, it's my dream house. One of them.
Well, it was marvelous. It really was. And I suspected at some point that it was her estranged father, right, responsible for that house. But of course, I couldn't be sure. And it was very satisfying to discover that it was indeed him, that I was right on some point. You have a really nice way, whether it's around the mystery part of the murder or the mystery of the other things occurring in the story, where you kind of give someone options to think, oh, it's that, or oh, maybe it's that. And then, oh no, what? But then in the end, there's a couple you give the reader where the reader goes, I was right about that. And that's very satisfying as a reader. Just thank you very much.
That makes me happy. I had a lot of fun with this book. And the thing is, so many things just sort of came to me as I was writing, and I'm a plotter, I do the whole spreadsheet and all that, and then I go back, but so much of this book just came to me. So I think it was, some of it was just serendipitous. It just popped into my head as I was writing. But I do always try to keep the reader guessing, although, a couple things, as you say, that's good, but I want to keep them guessing. And the thing with Hadley's father and the house, I had thought about, because this is, of course, the first book in a series. And so I had thought about holding that information for a later book, and just having Hadley being here in this sort of house sitter position for several books, and then revealing it maybe in book 4 that her father did that. But as I was writing, it just felt right to have that be a part of this story, and to resolve that for the reader and not leave the reader hanging on that point. And it just felt like the right thing to do. It was one of those organic sort of pantser type things that came in. I was like, nope, this is the way this is going to go. And so even though I am a plotter, I do have pantser tendencies. And that sort of came to me, that's the way the story needed to unfold.
I appreciated that, because I think it would have made me a little bit sad if the estrangement had continued between her father and stepmother, because her relationship with her stepbrother is so good, or half brother, sorry,
Yeah.
is so good. And also it kind of goes back to Miss Eugenia and her desire to reunite her friends and their daughter and stepdaughter. So that was satisfying to me. And I thank you very much for not stretching that out over several books.
You're welcome. You know, I really set out always to have family in my books because family is very important to me. And that's just something that, you know, Liz Talbot has this wild, boisterous family, biological family, like I do, you know, and so she gets that from me. But with Hadley, in order to differentiate her, I decided that she would not have the large family and the built-in, you know, support system that Liz Talbot has, at least not to the degree that Liz has. Because in hindsight, I think I made Liz's life just a little too perfect. But that's one of the things you learn when you're writing your first few books, I guess, your first series, and to not do that, you know, and I think I made her life just a little too perfect. But Hadley, on the other hand, you know, she has what we're calling found family. You know, I mean, she does have at the beginning of the book, she has the half brother, and then she has, you know, the estranged father. Yeah, but then yes,
Rudy.
Gavin, Joe, and Rudy are her other family who were not really biological family. And then, of course, she meets the ladies of the Sullivan's Island Supper Club. And over the course of all the books of this series, that's the core cast, the Sullivan's Island Supper Club. And so those ladies we will revisit over and over. And they are now Hadley's circle, her found family, her just really close friends. And so that's something I want to explore, you know, as these books roll out, is that group of women and their relationships and how that group came to be.
Amazing. They were amazing.
Thank you.
They were amazing. And you know, one of the nice things about a well-written book, in my opinion, are the little gifts, the little Easter eggs that we find in the stories, right? We don't expect. And that you, as I'm sure, were probably in some ways pantsing moments when they appear. But one I wanted to ask you about, and you know, and I could have missed it if you called it out explicitly, but I think it was almost a very subtle thing that you did. And when you started off with her day before her birthday, and the way she celebrates her birthday was by destroying one of her father's collected cars, right? And he lets her. He just stands there and lets her, almost because if that's the price of having her in his presence, he's willing to pay it, right? And then it turns out she goes a lot of talking about she drives her mother's car, Jolene, and that's what she prefers to drive. She has another car she drives on other occasions, but that's her car. And then at the end, there's reference to the car that he gave her mother when they were going to get married, or when she was sick. I don't remember exactly when he gave her the car, but ironically, she is very likely driving the car that her father gave her mother when she was expecting the child. And it just goes right back to the car parties that Hadley has on the day before her birthday. And I thought, wow, ooh, that's really cool. Now, did you intend that?
I did intend that would be the car that, you know, her father gave her mother at some point very early in their relationship. And I mean, I wanted it to be clear to the reader that Swinton's intentions were always pure, and that he loved both Hadley and her mother, and he wanted a life with them. And that, you know, even though Hadley always blamed him, it was really Vivienne who decided that that was not the way things were going to go, because she didn't want that kind of life, the only kind of life Swinton could ever lead. That was not what she wanted. And, you know, I wanted the reader to know that. And I wanted that to come back full circle, and for Hadley to be, you know, ironically driving the car that her father had given her mother all those years ago, and not even knowing it, although she must have on some level have suspected.
On some level, I think she knew, right?
Because she's a smart girl, Hadley.
Right.
But she
and
didn't
that's why
destroy
she targeted the cars. No. So I think you're right. I think on some levels here, I'm talking about oh yes, on some level she knew. Only the author knows for sure. What else?
Yeah.
What else,
Well,
Susan? What would you like to say about the story, about
oh,
anything?
oh gosh. Just that I really am. I just love these characters so much, and I'm really invested in them now. And so I get a lot of questions as I've gone about. Well, you may be aware I had a partial book tour. I had to cancel the last part of it
Mhm.
because, sadly, we have some family members with some very real health issues, and my presence is needed for that. And you can probably tell I'm in another hotel room now, which is the last time we spoke, I was in a different hotel room. But anyway, oh gosh, I'm bad to go off on tangents. So I'm sorry. What were we talking about?
Well, a lot of our readers too have been in this position where they have family issues, life issues that take them hither and thither, and they're all trying to keep up with everything. And I think that you do an amazing job dealing with all of those things and still giving us such wonderful books like this.
Thank you.
Amazing job, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think I remembered now what I was going to say. I
Mm-hmm.
was talking, you had asked me about, what else I wanted to talk about. And the thing is, I get asked a lot as I go about the book tour. I get asked about Liz Talbot and what her future is. And um, I'm going to let Liz and Nate stay where they are. I left them in a good place at the end of Lowcountry Getaway,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to let them stay there for a while. I'm not saying there won't be more Liz and Nate. I'm saying there won't be more Liz and Nate right now for two reasons. One is I want to focus on Hadley and her new set of characters because I'm just really invested in these characters. I really like them. I'm interested in exploring them some more and writing more about them. And that's just what I'm excited about writing at this point. I do care a lot about Liz and Nate and that whole clan. But the second reason I need to let them rest for a while is that, okay, I don't write about real people. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But Liz's parents bear some similarities to my parents. It's not like they're based on them, but some of the things these characters do have been suggested by things my parents have done, actions taken, not people. So, but because of that, in my head, they look like my parents. Those characters are my parents in my head. And they're going through some really tough times right now, health wise. And so I can't write these happy, just energetic books that have all this, lighthearted fun and daddy doing these crazy antics right now because those characters in my head are not in a lighthearted, happy time right now. So I just can't
Right.
write that. And I hope that I will at some point be able to go back and write more about those characters. But for right now, I think it's better that I just let them sit and be happy in their good place. And then after I've played with Hadley and her friends for a while, maybe I'll come back and play with those characters.
Right.
Oh, there was something else. Somebody asked me as I was, making the rounds, if Liz and Hadley would ever cross paths, if they're would ever be on the same case or something like that. And the answer to that is that's not possible because in Hadley Cooper's world, there is no Stella Maris. It does not exist. There is Deweese Island is on the map where it appears on many maps in Hadley's world. And so not only does Liz Talbot not exist in Hadley's world, but the island she lives on is not there. So and I did that very deliberately because there's such a large cast of characters in Stella Maris and Liz's family. I mean, after 11 books and several short stories, I have added a lot of characters to that cast of characters. It's a huge spreadsheet. And Hadley is accumulating a large cast of characters over here. She has her own spreadsheet. And so I was afraid it would confuse me and everybody else if I started crossing those. It would just be too much. So we're not going to go there. We're going to keep everybody in their separate worlds. I'm trying to think if anybody else, because I get a lot of questions about this. People are concerned
Sure.
not just about Rhett now, but they're concerned about Liz and Nate. So, anyway.
Right. Well, but as we say, we've left them in a happy spot.
Yes.
I've had to say that for my characters too. And if in order to have another story, I have to create conflict, and I really don't want to break them up or kill someone off for
Yeah.
the sake of another book. Let them be happy as they are right now, and we'll see what happens down the road.
Yeah. Now, see, that's a great idea. And it works for women's fiction. It's different with a mystery because you
Mhm.
always have to have a dead body if you're writing mysteries. So,
Right.
you know, and my setup for that is, and lots of people do it different ways, but my setup for is because I have a detective, I have a new client every book. So there's organically new characters in every
Right.
book because you have a new client, you have a new victim. And so there are people who come in who weren't known in the previous books. And so that brings an organic way to have something fresh, you know.
Mhm.
But I'm thinking that in this new series, the Carolina Tales series, which the first one, of course, is Big Trouble on Sullivan's Island, that series is going to be a different kind of series. So Hadley Cooper will be the main character for some of the books. And of
Mhm.
course, Josephine Eugene will be back, and all the other characters. But some of the books in the series will not be Hadley books. They'll still be a part of the Carolina Tales. But let's say maybe Tallulah Whitworth will be the main character, the protagonist
Mhm.
in the next book, which is going to be Sullivan's Island Supper Club. And it's going to deal with how this group of women got connected to begin with. And so it's actually taken a step back in time to a place where Eugenia is very much alive and a part of the Sullivan's Island Supper Club. And we're going to get to know these women better. And
Mhm.
so that's going to be women's fiction. And there'll be an element of mystery in it, but the main character won't be a detective. And so that's the next book in that series. So it's like a series that's going to have, it's going to cross genres, which I've never seen that before. It's something new. I hope readers like it, but
Well,
I'm
I
thinking
think
it's
you're
going to be fun.
fine though. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, if you were to do something really, really different, that might be jarring.
Mm,
But your mystery in this particular book, the way you tell it and your voice with it is very much like women's fiction with a lot of suspense and mystery, right?
thank you.
And so there's nothing that prevents you from writing something that's more women's fiction, but it will still have suspense because
Right.
I don't think there is commercial fiction without some level somewhere in there of suspense and romance.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You've got one or the other or both, you know,
Hmm.
and I try to
So
have a
you're just
little of both.
shifting the portions on the
Right.
plate.
Exactly. That's my plan.
I'll read it
Thank you. That makes me happy.
with delight. I loved your writing voice very much.
Well, it's mutual. I enjoy yours. So I guess,
Thank
it
you.
makes sense.
Maybe that's it.
Do we have any other questions on our list that we haven't answered? I can't think of any.
Well, there was a question about using a spreadsheet to plot an outline. You did mention that you do tend to plot ahead, but then the pantser rushes in and gives you Josephines and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, how much do you know of what you're going to write before you start those first words?
So far, I've only plotted mysteries. And so I know in the beginning who did what to who and why. And I put that at the bottom, and the final scene, how it's going to end up. And then I go back and I make uh, one chapter per line. And so I outline the story, work out how my detective is going to solve that, how she's going to work it out. And then I go back and start writing. And then as I write, I change things. So I have a pretty well developed outline before I start, but sometimes there'll be blank lines. It's like I'll think of new chapters that need to be added as I'm writing, and then I kind of fill
Hmm.
in some of the gaps.
And
Um,
as some characters walk on stage and present
exactly, like
themselves and
Josephine.
say,
Yes,
"Here I am."
yes, like Josephine. She walked straight
Yes.
in and said,
Yeah.
"I've got this," and let me know right away that which parts of the story she wanted to tell. And I have so much fun with that character. That she's one of my favorite characters. And I like
That's
the
lovely.
idea of having that observer, to just
Hmm.
report objectively what's happening, because there are times when Hadley won't be around to see things, and there are times when I just want that other point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. Because she's a very strong minded person.
Hmm.
So it's nice to kind of see it from a slightly more objective eye, even though Josephine has her own set of worldview
Oh yeah,
that
she
keeps it
does.
from being maybe totally objective, but we just get that other slice of life viewpoint from her as to how she sees it. When I'm looking at the questions, hoping we haven't missed anybody's specific question. I think we've hit the most, but
Okay.
we do have someone who wants to know if you're going to be sharing the prickly pear margarita recipe.
Oh, that's Chrissy, I know. So yes, I am going to share that recipe in the next newsletter that goes out. Chrissy told me she tried one, but hers was a little sweet, and the one I had was not that sweet. So we're going to send out the recipe for that, and then there will be, occasional recipes. And actually, I'm thinking I might put a poll in the newsletter so that people can tell me what recipe they want, because there are quite a few dishes for people who are interested in eating whole food plant-based. There are quite a few dishes that are mentioned that people have said, oh, I want that recipe, or I want that. The gravy is popular, and so different things that, especially that Gavin has made, people are asking about. So I'm thinking I might just put a poll in the newsletter. Here's the prickly
Mhm.
pear. Which one would you like to see next? And we'll see what kind of results we get from that.
Well, then, for anyone listening, if you do not subscribe to her newsletter, make sure you run and do that before she sends it out so that you don't miss out on the recipes.
Thank you, Grace.
So tell us what's next. What's next, Susan? Is the
Okay.
next book almost written and we're going to get to follow up?
Whew. The next book is not almost written, but I'm going to work really, 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 really hard to get that out in late September. If everything lines up, that's when I plan to deliver it, is September 26th. But, I'm not promising that at this point, because so much in my life is up in the air right now. And some of it is just beyond my control. So I'm going to do the best
Exactly.
I can to get the book out September 26th. If I don't make September 26th, I don't really want to it depends how quickly I can get it out. If it goes past a certain point, I don't want it to be a Christmas book. So I might wait until
Right.
after the first of the year. But we'll see. And I will keep everyone posted via the newsletter and Facebook and all the usual places.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan. Did we miss anything? Anything you'd like to add? You've been talking. I've had you talking here for almost 40 minutes.
Thank you, Grace. I appreciate that. And I think we've covered everything. And I thank you so much for doing this, for being here. I really enjoy having you participate in these discussions. And actually, before this, when we talked about my book, I just did a talk, just a sort of an ask me anything. And I have to say, it's much less stressful to have somebody to talk to and to just give me the questions without me having to remember all the things I wanted to talk about, which is kind of like doing a luncheon or a speaking engagement or whatever. But anyway.
This is my pleasure, Susan. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I would say Big Trouble on Sullivan's Island is my favorite read of the year.
Oh, wow.
I
Thank
thoroughly
you.
devoured that book
Thank
and
you.
I just marveled at your voice and how you expressed so much without overburdening anyone with description. And yet I knew exactly where I was, who I was dealing with, and I want that sequin dress. And I want to look good in it like Hadley did. Can you arrange that?
I wish I could, because that's my dream too.
Well,
that was something else I Googled and found online, the pretty dress. And I found the perfect dress, and then I thought, she can never afford this, so she's going to have to get it in a consignment shop.
$6,000. Yeah, that's a deal. It was fun to live vicariously with that dress. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for doing this. And I guess we will reconvene next month to talk about, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. I think it's
I have a total
I think it's Victoria Benton Frank. My Magnolia Summer, I think, is next month. So we'll reconvene.
Oh, great. Well, you've got it on your Facebook page, the great big header that tells who's coming up when.
You're right.
So anyone who is curious and wants to plan that ahead, they can see it there.
Thank you, Grace. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.